Tonight, I'll tell you a story, but not just one. This is the beginning of a legend, whispered in back alleys, written in case files that were never meant to be opened, carried by those who still worship him in shadows. They call him the Butcher. Not merely a killer, not merely a man. His story twists through blood, through fire, and into something much darker. If you think you know where this tale will end, you don't. It begins, as all stories of monsters do, with death. There are murderers whose names are written in police files, whose crimes are remembered in documentaries, whose victims are mourned in vigils. And then there are those who go further, killers whose cruelty is so profound, so devoid of humanity, that their names are never spoken aloud. Their legacy is silence, their reward something far darker than prison or the grave. The Devil's Butcher was one of those men. In life, he was nameless in the way that only drifters are nameless. No records, no family, no anchor. He drifted from town to town, carrying little more than a sack of tools, a knife wrapped in cloth, and eyes that burned too brightly in the dark. He left no friends behind, only questions and trails of ruin that never quite made sense until it was too late. His killings were not clean nor quick. He did not crave money or revenge. He craved the act itself. He carved the bodies of his victims into grotesque parodies of life, stretching their flesh as though trying to create something new from their ruin. Locals whispered that he believed he was shaping art, that his murders were attempts at building something divine from bone and blood. But divinity was not what he found. When the law caught him, it was not through cunning but accident. A single traffic stop, a routine inspection. In the trunk, they found what remained of his most recent victim, a body flayed open, ribs pried apart like the wings of a grotesque angel. He was dragged to prison in chains, his trial a spectacle, his conviction inevitable. But death by hanging was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. Because when the rope snapped his neck, he did not find darkness. He found fire. Hell did not wait patiently for him. It surged, swallowing him whole before his body even cooled. One instant, the gallows creaked above him. The next, he was lying on black stone, the air thick with sulfur, the ground trembling as though alive. Hell did not resemble the fiery pits of Scripture. It was worse. A vast plain of smoldering flesh stretched in all directions, broken only by rivers of molten bone. The sky above churned with smoke and faces that writhed like oil, their mouths open in endless screams. The Butcher staggered to his feet, but there was no weakness in him here. He felt strong, stronger than he ever had in life, as though the weight of his sins had burned away the limits of flesh. And then came the hooks. They tore from the ground like iron flowers, barbed and dripping. They pierced his back, his arms, his legs, dragging him down until his face pressed against the molten stone. Pain roared through him, but he did not scream. Instead, he laughed, the sound echoing across the plain. Here was a place that understood him. Here was a place that matched his hunger. The torment did not end. Demons with bodies of charred sinew and jaws of bone pulled him apart, stitch by stitch, unraveling his flesh until nothing remained but raw nerve and bone. They fed his body to the rivers and pulled it back from the currents again, over and over. Each time, his form grew less human. His ribs jutted like spines, his arms stretched into blades, his mouth split wider than it should, teeth multiplying like shards of glass. The Butcher was not punished in hell. He was remade. It is said that hell does not waste cruelty. It takes the cruel and turns them into tools. And so the man who had butchered in life became a butcher in death, a demon forged from his own hunger. His hands became cleavers, dripping eternally with blood that was not his own. His eyes burned red, glowing with the light of every soul he had carved apart. His laughter became a howl that split the air, driving the damned to madness. He did not wander hell aimlessly. He hunted. Through its endless caverns and burning fields, he stalked the lost, tearing them apart with the same delight he once had in life. But there was a difference now. Each soul he carved did not die. They screamed, shattered, and were pulled back together, only to be butchered again, over and over, eternally. The other demons did not challenge him. They gave him space, for even among them, he was feared. His cruelty outmatched theirs, his hunger deeper, his madness more profound. He became a legend whispered in hell's depths, a name carried on screams, the Devil's Butcher. But legends do not remain contained. Some say he learned to slip through the cracks, to climb back toward the world he had left. Not fully, never fully. His body was bound to hell, his shape too monstrous to walk among men. But his shadow could. His hunger could. There are places where the veil is thin, where murder has soaked the ground so deeply that hell itself leaks through. In those places, travelers speak of a figure standing at the edge of the trees, cleavers hanging at his side, body half hidden in smoke. They hear the scrape of metal on stone, the wet sound of blades through flesh, though no wound marks them. They wake with bruises shaped like hooks, with dreams of fire and laughter that is not theirs. The Devil's Butcher does not kill quickly. He drags time out, savoring each moment as though replaying the art he once made in life. Victims are found flayed open, arranged like sculptures, their blood painted in patterns no one can understand. Some are never found at all. And when you stand too close to those places, you may hear it. The sound of chains dragging across stone, hooks sinking into flesh, laughter echoing from beneath the earth. You may feel the ground soften beneath your feet, as though it is not stone or soil, but living tissue, waiting to pull you down. Because the Devil's Butcher does not belong only to hell. He belongs wherever cruelty lives. He belongs wherever blood is spilled for pleasure. He belongs in every shadow cast by fire. And if you listen closely, you may hear him breathing just behind you, waiting for the moment you step into the dark. You've now heard the tale of the Butcher, a man whose cruelty carved a place for him in the nightmares of all who knew his name. But death did not stop him. Something about him was too heavy for the grave, too loud for silence. His name surfaced again and again, not in rumors, but in official documents, police reports, missing persons files, evidence that should have been buried but refused to stay hidden. These are the records that were never meant for the public. The reports that show the Butcher did not end. He only changed. Case File 1974. The Cleaver Murders. Recovered document. Albany County Sheriff's Office Archive. Box 12B. Stamped. Destroyed, but preserved on microfilm. Incident report. The 12th of March, 1974. Reporting officer. Detective Raymond H. Carter. Case number 74 to 112C. Classification: homicide, ritual. The summary: 3 bodies discovered at abandoned farmhouse outside Chesterfield, New York. All victims found in basement, arranged in unnatural positions. Extensive mutilation consistent with post-mortem staging. Symbols painted on walls in blood. Notable findings: victims identified as missing persons from neighboring counties. No defensive wounds. Symbols do not correspond with known cults or gangs. Marks carved into rib cages resemble wings. Odor in basement described by responding officers as chemical mixed with rot. Evidence collected: bone fragments not matching victims. Hook embedded in ceiling beam. Journal fragments with illegible handwriting. Case remains active. Officer notes: March 14, 1974. Basement excavation revealed additional remains beneath floorboards. Estimated 12 to 15 individuals. Some skeletal structures appear altered. Forensic pathologist Dr. Harold Wainwright described them as reconstructed incorrectly. as though someone tried to build a human out of spare parts. One set of remains included elongated ribs sharpened at the ends. Unclear if natural deformation or deliberate alteration. Witness statement, March 20th, 1974. Local vagrant, name withheld, claims he saw figures carrying bundles into farmhouse weeks before discovery. States he heard laughter at night, like steel scraping stone. Witness intoxicated during interview. Case update, the 2nd of April, 1974. One incident. Fire destroyed Chesterfield farmhouse overnight. No accelerant detected. Fire described by responders as unnatural, white, and silent. All collected evidence had already been transported. Site remains restricted. Evidence log addendum. The 10th of April, 1974. During cataloging, technicians reported unusual phenomena with physical evidence. Hooks appeared to rust within hours of collection, though conditions controlled. Bone fragments gave off odor similar to burnt hair when exposed to light. Journal fragments rearranged themselves between inventories. Handwriting shifted orientation. Items moved to cold storage. Case escalation, the 7th of May, 1974. String of disappearances across Tri-County area matches pattern. Victims vanish without signs of struggle. Vehicles found abandoned, engines running. At 3 scenes, crude bone sculptures recovered. Each sculpture incorporated personal effects of victims. Pattern suggests organized group activity, possible cult. Confidential memo, June 15th, 1974. Handwritten note, unsigned, found clip to case file. They are not copying. They are continuing. The butcher did not die in 36. He changed. These arrangements are not crime scenes. They are doorways. Incident report, the 4th of July, 1974. Sheriff's deputy responding to missing persons call in Pine Hollow failed to report back. Backup located patrol car idling at roadside. Radio still transmitting static. Inside vehicle. Uniform intact, but body absent. Driver's seat soaked in black blood. Steering wheel scored with deep gouges. Nearby tree line contained object resembling statue built from multiple torsos. Structure unstable. Collapsed when touched. Autopsy of recovered remains inconclusive. Tissue density abnormal. Described as rubbery, resistant to incision. Restricted entry. August 29th, 1974. Case transferred from Sheriff's Office to federal jurisdiction. Files marked "Do not circulate." However, microfilm copy survived in county archives. This reproduction shows signs of tampering. Pages out of order. Whole sections redacted with ink resembling dried blood. Marginalia not in original officer handwriting. Examples of marginalia. He walks with a cleaver's fall. The art is the door. Chains drag across the earth. Final report draft, September 17th, 1974. Unfinished. Detective Carter's last entry before case closure. Patterns expanding. Symbols found not just on victims, but in soil, trees, stone, as if burned into landscape itself. Cannot be human work. Evidence suggests recurrence every 27 to 30 years. Possibly linked to execution of name redacted. Smell and evidence locker worsening. Staff complain of nightmares. Dream of hooks, fire, laughter. Feel watched. I believe subject not confined to past. Subject active. Subject closer. File ends here. Archivist's note -1989. Recovered microfilm found in mislabeled box. Condition poor, images degraded. Attempted digitization resulted in corruption of 3 reels. Last reel produced only audio track, 0:00 to 0:04. Static, 0:05 to 0:18, sound of chains dragging. 0:19 to 0:22, human laughter, distorted. 023 to 028, screaming. 029, recording ends. The case files tell us the butcher could not be contained, could not be erased. But his story did not stay confined to paper. Whispers spread. Symbols appeared on walls. Families disappeared. And in the shadows, people gathered, not to hide from him, but to praise him. A cult was born. Not every monster needs worshippers, but the butcher has them. And through them, his legend grows. The cult of the cleaver. There are monsters that die when the rope snaps or the needle pierces the vein. Their names fade. Their crimes are picked apart by scholars. Their bones rot quietly under the soil. But some killers refuse to end. Some killers carve so deeply into the world that death itself cannot contain them. The butcher was one of those men. His killings in life were obscene bodies flayed into grotesque statues, ribs pried open like wings, faces sewn into masks of pain. He died by the hangman's rope, but when the crowd dispersed and the grave was filled, his story did not finish. Hell took him, stripped him, burned him, and forged him into something else, the devil's butcher. But hell is not a prison. It is a forge, and what it creates does not stay hidden forever. The first whispers began with the men who cleaned the gallows. They swore they heard laughter echo from the coffin before it was lowered into the ground. The priest who presided over the funeral rites reported the soil shifted for weeks afterward, as if something inside pressed against the lid. Within months, the grave had sunk deep, as though devoured from beneath. Those who remembered his killings felt something else too. A pull, a hunger. They returned to the crime scenes, to the empty fields and basements, and felt a presence lingering in the air. They began to dream of him, standing in the shadows, cleavers dripping, calling them forward with a gaze that burned hotter than fire. And so the first cultists were born. They were not the desperate or the unhinged. They were the fascinated, the ones who looked at his atrocities and felt awe instead of revulsion. Men who had collected newspaper clippings of his trial. Women who had hidden under blankets and shivered at the radio reports, but never turned them off. They began to gather in secret, sharing his name, sketching his crimes, tracing the shapes carved into his victim's flesh. They told themselves they were only remembering, but memory became devotion, and devotion became worship. They called themselves the Cleavers. Their rituals were crude at first, carving symbols into animals, daubing barns with blood. But soon they escalated. They imitated his murders, arranging victims the way he had, recreating the grotesque wings of bone, the statues of flayed flesh. Each time they acted, they felt him nearer. Each time the air grew thicker, the shadows deeper. By the 1940s, the cult had spread across counties. Disappearances were blamed on drifters, accidents, the chaos of war. But the Cleavers kept careful records, writing in journals bound in skin, each page filled with drawings of their handiwork. They spoke of the butcher as though he guided their hands, whispering instructions from the dark. And perhaps he did, because the line between hell and earth is not as firm as men believe. Murder thins it, cruelty tears holes in it. Every act of blood in the butcher's name became a thread, weaving a bridge between realms. The cultists thought they were honoring him. In truth, they were building him a doorway. By the 1960s, witnesses claimed to see him at the edges of their crimes. A shape too large for a man, body warped and jagged, cleavers gleaming. Victims spoke of seeing a figure behind their captors, watching silently. Police investigating scenes found strange burns in the floors, claw marks on stone. The cult denied nothing. They wanted him closer. They wanted him back. In the 1980s, whole families vanished. Houses stood empty, doors open, meals still on the table. In basements, investigators found arrangements of bone that matched no human skeleton, sculptures of meat that pulsed as if alive. They sealed the reports, but rumors spread of a demon walking in the fields. The cleavers grew bolder. No longer a handful of worshippers, but dozens, hundreds, across states and borders. They spread his name in whispers, teaching new recruits the rites. Blood was spilled in abandoned factories, forgotten churches, crumbling barns. Always the same symbols, always the same artistry, and always the same presence watching. By the 2000s, the cult had gone global. Forums hidden in the dark web shared images too grotesque for police archives. Videos surfaced of rituals where chanting drowned out the screams. Law enforcement tried to infiltrate, but agents vanished, their reports ending mid-sentence. One file contained only a final phrase, "He is here." And still the world turned oblivious, because the cult knew how to hide. They buried their dead in foundations of new buildings, built sculptures of flesh inside walls no one would open for decades. They spread like a disease, invisible until it was too late. And the Butcher himself? He was no longer confined to hell. Piece by piece, body by body, he stepped closer to the surface. Not whole, never whole, but present. A shadow at the edge of the firelight. A figure in the static of a recording. Hooks scraping across the floor of a locked room. The cult had succeeded. They had not summoned a ghost, nor a memory, but the real thing, the demon hell had forged. Now his legend is not whispered only in hell's depths. It is alive here, in the mortal world, in the places where cruelty flourishes. People vanish not into prison cells or shallow graves, but into him, their bodies rearranged into new forms, their souls dragged screaming into fire. And the cult still thrives. They walk among us, smiling, ordinary, invisible, until the knife comes down. Their victims are not random. They are chosen, marked by bloodlines, places, dates, all part of patterns no one can decipher but them. Patterns that feed him, that anchor him, that let him grow. There are stories of towns where everyone vanished in a single night, of hospitals where the power failed and whole wards were found emptied, of highways where cars are discovered with doors open, engines running, and no trace of the drivers. All left behind the same marks: cleaver wounds, hooks, statues of bone. If you travel far enough, you will hear his name. The Devil's Butcher, the Cleaver's Lord, the hunger that walks. And if you hear it often enough, if you linger too long near the places where the disappearances cluster, you may see him too. Standing in the shadows, taller than any man, cleavers at his side, eyes burning red. You may hear the scrape of chains across the floor, the sound of hooks digging into stone. And if you see him, it is already too late, because his cult does not choose victims at random. They choose witnesses. They choose those who know the story. The Butcher's Tale is not just a story of one man. It's the story of what happens when cruelty becomes eternal. From his first killings, to the files that still bleed with his name, to the followers who call to him even now, the Butcher is no longer bound by life or by death. He is an idea carved into flesh, a hunger carried forward. If you see his mark, if you hear his name, if you feel the weight of eyes in the dark, know this: the Butcher's story is not over, and perhaps it never will be.